Imagine an army so vast it could replace every soul in Washington, D.C. in one day, marching into a void, a silence so deep it swallowed the greatest empire on earth. They didn't fall to enemies. They didn't fall to bullets. They fell to the hunger. They fell to the cold. They fell to the sheer, crushing scale of a land that refused to be conquered. 685,000 men crossing this river. Dreams of glory, crowns of gold, empires to be built. 6 months later. Darkness. Fewer than 30,000 crawled back, skeletal, broken, hollow, ghosts wandering through their own memories. This is not a story of a war. This is a story of a vanishing. The day the world saw a god of war bleed. The year is 1811. Napoleon Bonaparte is no longer a man. He is a force of nature. From the sun-drenched palaces of Madrid to the bustling ports of Berlin, the entire continent of Europe bows to a single will. He has defeated the Austrians. He has crushed the Prussians. He has out-negotiated the Russians. For a decade, his Grande Armée has been invincible. The Napoleonic Order seems immortal. But in the East, the alliance with Tsar Alexander I is rotting. The continental system, Napoleon's dream of an economic blockade against Britain, is killing Russia. Grain is piling up in warehouses. Rubles are worthless. The Russian nobles whisper, "Defy him." Single quote. Alexander, once an admirer of the French emperor, finally snaps. He opens his ports to the British. The alliance is dead. The gauntlet is thrown. Napoleon's response is not a diplomatic note. It is the largest military force gathered in human history. He calls it the Grande Armée, but the soldiers call it the Babel of 1812. This is a truly global army. Only half are French. The rest are Italians, Poles, Germans, Swiss, Dutch, and Portuguese. A dozen languages, 100 different uniforms, but one single, terrifying collective purpose: the total subjugation of Russia. Napoleon believes in logistics. He brings 20 days' worth of food. He brings 50,000 wagons. He brings thousands of cattle. He thinks he can outsupply the Russian vastness. He is wrong. June 24, 1812. 3 massive bridges span the Nemen River. As the sun rises, the vanguard of the 600,000 begins to cross. Napoleon watches from a hill, confident. In 2 months it will be over, he predicts. He has no idea that he is walking into a trap set by the earth itself. The invasion begins, but the war does not. Napoleon expects a decisive battle on the border. He finds nothing. The Russian army under Barclay de Tolly retreats, day after day, week after week. But they don't just leave. They burn villages, barns, wheat fields, even individual huts. As the French advance, they find only black, smoldering earth and poisoned wells. The Russians are burning their own lives to starve the French crown. The heat is the first enemy. Temperatures soar to 100 degrees. Dust, thick as soup, chokes the throats of 600,000 men. Uniforms are caked in grime. The Grande Armée begins to look like a column of beggars. Logistics are failing immediately. The heavy wagons sink in the sandy roads. The beef cattle can't keep up and die. By the time they reach Vilna, without fighting a single major battle, Napoleon has already lost 10,000 horses and thousands of men to dysentery and exhaustion. August. Smolensk, the sacred gate of Russia. Finally, the Russians fight. For 2 days, the ancient brick walls of the city are hammered by 1,000 French cannons. The streets become a slaughterhouse. 20,000 men are torn apart in 48 hours. But as the French break through the gates, they find the city has been set on fire from within. Napoleon captures a graveyard of ash. The decisive battle has slipped his grasp again. His marshals are terrified. "Stop here," they beg. Winter is coming. The supply lines are 500 miles long. Single quote. But Napoleon is obsessed. Moscow is only 200 miles away. He believes if he takes the capital, the Tsar will crawl to him on his knees. September 7th, Borodino, 70 miles from Moscow. 250,000 men face each other in an area the size of a city park. It is the bloodiest day in European history until the First World War. It is not a battle of tactics, it is a battle of endurance. Napoleon orders wave after wave of frontal assaults against the Great Redoubt. Artillery shells fall like rain, one death every 2 seconds. The ground is literally soaked in red mud. By sunset, 70,000 men are dead or wounded. Napoleon wins, but it is a Pyrrhic victory of graves. The Russian army, though mangled, is not destroyed. They retreat into the night, leaving the road to Moscow open. A trap disguised as a victory. September 14th, Moscow. The golden domes of the Kremlin shimmer in the distance. Napoleon waits at the gates for a delegation. The keys to the city. The surrender of the Tsar. Nothing. The silence is deafening. As the French enter, they find a ghost city. 250,000 people have vanished overnight. Grand houses are empty. Markets are silent. Moscow is a hollow shell waiting for a spark. Midnight. The sky turns a terrifying orange. The Russians, under orders from Governor Rostopchin, have set their own capital on fire. Within hours, Moscow is a furnace. Lead melts from church roofs. The Kremlin walls silhouette against an infernal horizon. For 5 days, the city burns. Napoleon, standing on the balcony of the Kremlin, is stunned. "What a people!" he exclaims. "They are Scythians, they are burning their own capital." He waits in the ashes for 35 days, expecting a peace offer. It never comes. October 19th, the retreat begins. 100,000 men leave Moscow. They are laden with gold, silk, and silver loot. But they have no bread. They are an army of billionaires, starving in a desert of ash. Then, General Winter arrives, not with a blizzard, but with a whisper. On November 6th, the temperature plunges to -30 degrees. The air literally shatters. Breathe onto your hand and it turns to ice. Men become frozen statues, standing markers along the road home. The horses die first, 30,000 in a single week. Without horses, the artillery is abandoned. The supply wagons are burned for warmth. The Grande Armée ceases to be a military force. It becomes a 500-mile-long funeral procession. Hunger turns men into monsters. They eat raw horse meat. They scrape frozen hide for soup. There are reports of soldiers huddling inside the carcasses of dead horses to escape the wind. Every night, 5,000 men simply don't wake up. This is not just a war of kings anymore. It is a holy war. The Russian Orthodox Church labels Napoleon the Antichrist. Russian peasants, fueled by religious fervor, rise up with scythes and pitchforks. They don't take prisoners. They bury French soldiers alive. Cossacks hover like vultures on the flanks. They don't attack the main column. They wait for the stragglers. The scream of a man being dragged into the woods in the middle of a blizzard becomes the soundtrack of the retreat. Late November, the Berezina River, the final trap. The Russians have destroyed the bridges. 40,000 French survivors are huddled on the bank. Behind them, 3 Russian armies are closing in. To stay is to die. To cross is impossible. Then, a moment of heroic madness. 400 Dutch and French engineers enter the chest-deep freezing water. They have no tools. They use their bare hands to hammer wooden posts. Most die of hypothermia within 30 minutes. But they build 2 fragile bridges. The ghosts begin to cross. The bridges break. Halfway through, the Russian artillery opens fire. Panic turns to massacre. The bridges snap, throwing thousands into the slushy, current-filled water. The river becomes a jam of human bodies. 30,000 souls sink into the black void. Napoleon escapes. He leaves his men, fleeing in a fast carriage to Paris to secure his throne. The health of His Majesty is excellent, the official bulletin reports. In the snow of Russia, 650,000 of his subjects have different news. They are silent. The myth of the god of war is dead. Europe has seen him bleed. Within 2 years, Paris will fall. The man who owned a continent will die on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic. But Russia remains. A new giant has risen in the east. Across the vast plains today, you can still find them. A rusted button, a shattered canteen, a bone, buried beneath the silence of 1812. History is not found in the crowns of kings, but in the silence left behind. The archive is open. Like and subscribe for the declassified truth.